Peter, thank you for the facilitation. Members of the coalition, thank you very much for the warm invite. We are excited to be here. As a team, I am excited to be here to present on behalf of my organization, again, Law and the Fam LLC. We go by LATF for shorthand. And we're happy to present tonight for several different reasons. Some of which being, we'd like to provide a concrete testimonial of some of the benefits that can be derived from accessing R3 grant funds, particularly if you're in a situation like I was in and my co-founder was in. We come from R3 zones. We are of disproportionately impacted communities. We intuitively understand the needs of the community, and we have the lived experiences that allow us to be able to create on the fly, oftentimes, solutions and interventions that meet the needs of people who are from where we're from. And it could be very challenging to scale up or organize an operation in a way that allows you to maximize your competitiveness for these grant opportunities. So this is a presentation that's more oriented towards people who are in situations like we were in. You already do great grassroots community engagement level work, and you're looking to scale up that those investments to maybe bring on more personnel, maybe increase your reach, maybe to start whole new programs. And some of the barriers that you might face along the way as far as access to professional assistance or technical education and making that happen, et cetera, et cetera. This may not necessarily be optimized for people who are already within institutions that already have very large operating budgets or already have access to federal and state level grants. This is more of a, if you're really getting it from the mud and you're looking to organize and scale it up, especially if you've been bootstrapping up until this point in time. And I think one of the concrete testimonials that I can share with you right away, I am honored to have two members of my team to join us on today's call whose positions were created through the R3 grant funds. And we now have those brilliant team members of mine to assist with everything from administration and compliance work to program and participant outreach level work. And we absolutely could not get this done without them, and their jobs would not be possible without the grant. And with that being said, I would like to provide a PowerPoint presentation. There will be URLs and hyperlinks, and I will make sure that at some point in time after the presentation that we do make that publicly accessible so people can download and reference those slides. And Peter, if you can, thank you. I see it's just giving me an opportunity to share my screen. So thank you very much. Let's get right into it. Hey, is this showing up for everybody or no?
No.
Okay. Now? Yes. All right. You got to forgive me. We don't use Zoom as much in-house, so I'm a little bit rusty with it. So thank you for your patience. So again, we really want to focus on three systemic barriers that we had to overcome along the way to even getting into the door and competing for the grant. Of course, we can't promise that following these even step by step is going to be a guarantee of securing funding, but we feel like these are three fundamental tips, particularly if you're new to the game, particularly if you're not heavily resourced or privileged in the space. Three main tips that could at least put you in the best starting position to plan and to ultimately compete for an opportunity. Who we are, I like to be fully transparent. We are, as an organization, R3 grant recipients. We have nothing but praise for the program, and it's working wonders for both our program team and the people we serve. And I want to be fully transparent about that. We are funded by this program, and I also do want to separate what we do and say as an organization versus what's necessarily sponsored or endorsed by the program board or the funders. So what you're going to see in these slides are created by Law and the Fam. It's our opinions and our perceptions and perspectives, and not necessarily the opinions of our funders over at R3 Program Board and ICEJA. As far as an overview and setting some scene for what we're going to get into in the meat and potatoes of the content of today's presentation, I want to give very short background to the organization and maybe touch on just slightly the nature of the program that we've been able to implement and scale up through the R3 grant program. And I want to give very short shrift to that because if anyone is available and is attending the community resource fair on Saturday, my team will be there and we would be happy to speak with you more about the organization, our program, and we're pretty hard to miss. We got very loud and noticeable Law and the Fam hoodies, so you'll be able to locate us right away. A little bit of background about our organization. We are a small grassroots and first-time R3 grantee. We are an Illinois company, and our mission is to make legal education accessible to everyone. And we do this primarily on a different type of civil legal aid model, in that we do not provide direct legal services or representation, but we focus more on translating that legalese, translating that technical language into more digestible, eye-level, plain language information in a way that allows and empowers community-based organizations, people who may not have access to lawyers on their team, to be able to integrate that as a part of their ongoing toolkit to help advocate for themselves, advocate for the people they serve, and to ultimately scale up a compliance program that allows them to keep their grant funds running like a fine oiled machine. One of the best visual presentations that I love about where we like to sit at as a company at LATF, we like to be at the intersection of law, education, and people, and really bringing that legal education service directly to the people. A little bit of background about our co-founders over at LATF. My partner and I are first-generation attorneys. We come directly from R3 zones, and again, we are first-time grantees. We were doing a substantial amount of community-level workshops and educational outreach prior to scaling up our program through the R3 grant funds. And we were pretty much getting it from like workshop to workshop, 10, 15 community members at a time. And we wanted an opportunity to be able to reach a broader base, and the grant program has allowed us to do that. And we would love to see more first-time grantees, more people who are of R3 zones, getting an opportunity to scale and finance their operations in a way that increases the positive impact for those 5 priority areas that we're trying to approve through the R3 grant. Again, a little bit of information about our particular program that is supported and funded through the R3 program. It's called Legit Pathways Academy, or LPA for short. And what we do over there is we offer paid research fellowships for emerging adults ages 18 to 25, and we teach them legit career pathways into regulated industries. This particular educational outreach module is a part of our ongoing educational series that we like to call Hustling to Hiring. And we're very fond of that terminology because we, first of all, have a very positive connotation of the word hustling. From our perspective, it's about all the things that you do that are passion projects that you put a ton of sweat equity into, and you do it because you love it, and you do it because you love the people who are positively impacted by it. And what we're looking to do is to help people take those ideas, those connections, and to scale it up in a way that becomes a full out operation. It allows you to bring on people as employees to help you deliver those services, and maybe even presents an opportunity for you to develop your own workforce development pipeline that allows you to continue to provide development opportunities for the people you serve, so that they can maybe even grow into program positions within your organization. Scope and big picture of today's presentation. Again, we're focusing on self-representation tools. This is about bootstrapping. This is about making yourself the strongest possible self-advocate, particularly if you are in an under-resourced position and you don't necessarily have access to professional grant writers or lawyers and legal personnel that can kind of help you with the technical language and the compliance issues around everything from budgeting to narrative description to maybe even formally organizing your business. We also like to keep the disclaimer in there, reminding everybody that this isn't necessarily intended to be evergreen content. A lot of what we're talking about is rooted in law, rules, and statutes, and even sometimes institutional practices, and those are all subject to change over time. So please bear in mind that this presentation is intended to be treated for a contemporary consumption and may not necessarily hold up well over time if rules change, if institutional practices change, et cetera. Now, sliding on into our substantive top 3 tips for accessing the R3 fund. Again, particularly if you're in the position that we were in, doing kind of the grassroots and in our instance, mom and pop level work, getting great feedback and buy-in from the community and trying to figure out how you can grow as a company and grow your service operations. Our first tip, pretty basic, but it's important. Get involved. And get involved has its own subcomponents. What we mean for the most part in getting involved is make sure that you're showing up to attend these public meetings, to learn more about the processes and the people involved, to get as educated as possible on the front end, and maybe even to get some opportunities to influence the final product for how notice of funding opportunity applications are put together, how outreach is being conducted to reach potential grant applicants, et cetera, et cetera. Or maybe you're not necessarily interested in applying for a grant. Maybe you know somebody who's interested in participating on one of these boards or commissions. There are current opportunities to participate in the process for grant making if you are interested in the program, even if you're not interested in becoming a grant recipient. The legal system and the regime around the current R3 grant program implementation focuses on 3 primary state organizations or state agencies and state bodies. I will work kind of from the right to the left of the slide because that's kind of the descending order from the agency that's closest to the grantee or the grant applicant that you'll be working with on the regular basis, day to day, and the agency that you'll be reporting to, and then abstracting out to the agencies that have more of a monitoring or oversight function within that system. So I'll start off with the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority. They go by ICJA for short. And we will be providing a hyperlink that will take you to their URL and website where you could see their back catalog of meeting minutes and meeting agendas. So if you feel like you want to be caught up to speed with how information about the grant has proliferated over time, and if you want to begin to forecast where it's going, that is a great resource. And it's particularly important to get on this involvement piece as soon as you can, preferably tomorrow, because the expectation is that the next notice of funding opportunity is going to be published likely in December. In cooperation with ICJA, we have the R3 Program Board. Their function is mostly to approve and monitor ICJA's implementation of the R3 program funds. We also provide a link to the R3 Program Board minutes and meeting agendas. and a relatively newly created public body, the Cannabis Equity Commission. They've only met once up until this point of time, I believe, and I believe their second meeting is tomorrow afternoon. So this link may not be available by then, but I do encourage people to check out the Cannabis Equity Commission, maybe through a Google search, and you can see the Illinois Commission's board where they sit, and it will provide you with a link to their WebEx meeting for tomorrow, and you can see the agenda that they've got on deck. And the statutory policy language around the purpose of this board is to provide another level of oversight and monitoring into the investments that are being made with R3 program grants as implemented by ICEJA and as monitored by the R3 program board. So 3 distinct bodies, yet they all create their own opportunities to participate, to hold those institutions accountable when they see more people from the community showing up and actively participating. And also, if you do want to directly participate in the administration and the selection of grantees, there are likely still open opportunities at all 3 of these bodies for community members to apply and participate. One of the next steps to following and understanding the legal system and thereby getting more actively involved, I'd like to get a little bit more granular into the kind of sub-functions and sub-bodies under the R3 program board, as well as the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority. Under the R3 program board, you'll find that there are some subgroups that handle the development of particular aspects of what you will ultimately end up seeing as an applicant for a grant. You've got a NOFO working group. Again, NOFO is shorthand for Notice of Funding Opportunity, and that's going to be like the digital packet that you access that gives you all the materials that you're going to need to fill out and provide information regarding in order to submit your application to compete for that grant funding. The R3 program board has a working group whose function mostly sticks to trying to figure out the most comprehensive and fairest way to construct that particular grant application and the instructions associated with it. You also have an evaluation committee that focuses more on trying to figure out a uniform and systematic way of evaluating the performance and, to a certain degree, the successes of the grant recipients. You've also got a grant application review committee, at least we did for the first round of funding. I'm not sure how this committee is going to evolve its role over time, but they are also kind of another check and balance to monitor ICEJA's implementation of the intentions behind how the application is crafted as it's presented to the grant applicants. Within the ICEJA, you've got a board of directors, you've got community reviewers, and at least for the first grant program iteration, you had the scoring of the applicants from a merit-based process, largely led by members of the community who came from the specific regions that were being funded under the program. So if you do find yourself being extremely interested in participating in grant making, but you're not necessarily interested in applying for a grant, this might be a good opportunity for you to exercise some say as to the types of reinvestments that are made in your community. Another important sub-body within ICEJA that people need to be aware of and to attend meetings and to become more familiar with their processes is the budget committee. The budget committee within ICEJA is they are the folks who actually approve any sort of funding recommendation that's made through the grant program. So ultimately, you need to receive their okay and blessing to actually qualify to receive those grant funds. So they have their own committee meetings and they are very much worth checking out and participating in. Next slide is about the overall legal framework that mostly drives the R3 grant making process. We've got the statutory language that creates the grant program under the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act. The statutory language and the intent is to help programs build capacity and infrastructure with a preference for local design and control over these interventions and the support systems. And both under the first round of grant funding and for this upcoming second round of grant funding, the R3 program is maintaining 5 priority areas. So if you are thinking about ways that you can change your community engagement or scale that up into a grant program, you're going to want to relate what you either do or what you plan to do to one or more of these priority areas: civil legal aid, violence prevention, youth development, reentry, and economic development. I'm going to kind of breeze past the lower tier framework under here, which is the Illinois Grant Transparency and Accountability Act. It's not necessarily a formal set of regulations. It's more of a system, and it's more of a process flow across Illinois state grant making agencies that's designed to align and make more uniform the grant making standards and administrative requirements for all state grants, as well as aligning those requirements with state and federal grants. And what that does is create a better opportunity, particularly for small scale organizations, to not have to concern themselves necessarily of trying to meet a broad diversity of grant documentation or reporting requirements or other standards that might otherwise be specific to a particular grant or specific to a federal grant as opposed to a state grant. And it creates more synergies across your administration to streamline some of those costs and efforts. Tip number 2, above and beyond getting involved, get organized. And I mean that holistically. I mean taking your program, which might not necessarily be formally organized or recognized at the Secretary of State. Make sure you are organizing that into some sort of entity. One of the main points I saw of misinformation being disseminated about the first round of R3 grants, I have no idea where this myth began, but I did see it perpetually distributed and repeated throughout multiple media outlets. People were making it seem as if you had to be organized as a nonprofit in order to apply for these funds. That's not true. Another mechanism that is used within the grant making process, whether you're applying for R3 grants or any other grant opportunity throughout the state of Illinois, the GATA system creates a user interface or dashboard that allows you to confirm your standing with these different databases and different government agencies that the grant making body, in this case ICJA, is going to cross-reference and check before they approve you to receive funds. Another cool thing about the R3 grant program is that it's probably the only grant that I'm aware of that allows you to do things in a different order. For most other grant programs, you have to receive GATA compliance, and you need to have your registrations complete and in good standing even before you apply to the grant. There is some leeway in the administration of the R3 grant that allows you to apply while you are still registering with these government bodies, while you're still leading up to getting into good standing. And I do want to forewarn everybody that some of these registrations do take time. So if you are planning to participate in this expected December NOFO, I would highly recommend that you begin today getting your entity organized formally and making sure that you at least start the process of getting these government registrations. Next step into getting organized has to do with how you frame your relationships with your prospective collaborators if you plan on submitting a collaborative application. One main hurdle that you might find yourself running into being a new kid on the block, you might find yourself running up against this kind of barrier to entry around bigger organizations might not necessarily want to collaborate with you for any number of reasons. Our solution to that is making sure that you're able to link up with more or less a peer organization where you have shared interest. You might kind of be at the same level of development and funding to where you can likely pitch a better opportunity to them if as you might not be able to pitch if there's a lot of disparities around organizational size and organizational interest. The second hurdle you might find yourself running into, because sometimes the grant making process does take time, and over time, organizations might make changes and it might be a bit difficult to keep those collaborations as well as the funders in alignment about the expectations under that commitment. So our solution to that is, as soon as possible, once you do identify that peer collaborator, drafting out a letter of commitment or some other document that serves a similar function that expresses the expected contributions of each member of that team. Running short on time, so I want to kind of speed this up. Tip number 3, make sure you translate your story. And that is going to largely be a function of knowing and owning what you do best, what you do uniquely, and taking that lived experience and layering it on top of the already recognized narrative structures and frameworks that are going to be publicly provided to you. For example, ICEJA has statewide prevention plans, data reports. The Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity has economic plans. There are also evidence-based models available that are already recognized as established sources of authority and information by these grant-making bodies. So it would be in your best interest to try to leverage those resources that are already recognized within the system as being authoritative in a way that could add value to how you articulate and explain how you do it, who you serve, and why this is projected to have a positive impact. The last kind of fundamental piece about how you focus your energies and efforts around drafting your applications have to do with the sections that inevitably come with the largest amount of points. And if we've learned anything from the cannabis opportunities regimes in Illinois, is that every point counts. Even if they call it optional, it is in your best interest to try to score every point on the board. And one of the ways to do that is to build credibility throughout your application is going to be in your performance measures chart. You're going to want to make sure that you have easily readable and articulated ways of saying that your program is making progress, and to provide the grant maker with an opportunity or an example of how you intend to measure that over time. And you want to make sure that those measurements are capable of telling a standalone story about the success and the intentionality behind your program. Next up, program budget and budget narrative. This is going to be a more technical piece, and it's probably worth its own educational module. But what you want to focus on is making sure that, although it may be optional, you want to fill it out because it is a demonstration to the grant maker that you understand how their investments in your expenses directly relate to your ability to move the ball forward on those performance measures. When we do upload this presentation and make it available, we will again provide those hyperlinks as a readily accessible and publicly accessible toolkit, so you can reference the government provided trainings, which are going to give you both illustrations of people who've already succeeded to where you might be able to borrow their frameworks or their templates so that you're not constantly trying to reinvent the wheel. And that is it for our time. I apologize if the tail end of that might have felt rushed, but we do intend on continuing to be available to provide more technical assistance and more educational opportunities in the future. And with that being said, I would like to either pass it back over to Peter to facilitate some Q&A, or to keep the meeting moving forward if we are too short on time.
That was fantastic.
Yep.
I think if we want to take a couple minutes to open it up for questions, just thank you first and foremost, Law and the Fam. That was fantastic. Definitely got a lot out of that. I know that I definitely feel more confident that our application this year is going to be a lot better than it was last year. But yeah, let's open it up for questions. Feel free to put things into the chat if you can't speak. But yeah.
Yep. Thank you very much, Law and the Fam. That was outstanding. I think it's going to help a lot of people that's on this call tonight. And we look forward to continue to partner and work with you guys. And thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you. And we are here. Thank you. And of course, if you do have any further questions about the presentation, about our organization, or about how we are implementing and using R3 funds, we will again be live and in person at the Community Resource Fair on Saturday. So we look forward to seeing people in the flesh.
Yep. We will. I would definitely be stopping by your table.
And if folks want to use this time to ask questions, please do. We can take a couple minutes before our next speaker.
I'll jump. Thank you so much for that presentation, Mr. Owens. That was incredible. So much value, and just glad that you're sharing these resources with the coalition and others. So thank you. My question was just around the program design piece. I know I saw it on the slides. I'm not sure if you had the chance to speak to that piece, but just wanted to get your sense on the best way to really design a program that's based on that statement of need. And if you could just spend a quick moment kind of speaking to a strategy there.
Yes, thank you for joining me tonight, Grant, and thank you for bringing the energy. I appreciate it. My primary suggestion or recommendation for treating and approaching the statement of need and the program design is to really focus in on your unique value as a service provider, and to marry that or to lay that on top of a framework that's already accepted and published by ICEJA. So if you go into those databases, which are going to be linked through the presentation materials, you'll see that ICEJA already has a research database that pretty much shows you, okay, we see that if you are offering civil legal aid, for example, these are kind of the national frameworks around promising practices for civil legal aid, and on down the line from violence prevention to economic development to youth development, et cetera, et cetera. So when you know the R3 program priority areas that you want to target for your program, and you know the unique value and the story that you can tell as an applicant, making sure that if it's possible, you're also pulling from those narrative frameworks that they've already recognized and acknowledged over at ICEJA, and integrating that into how you tell your story, and integrating that into how you provide supporting documentation or supporting evidence as to why your methodology is promising, or why you expect to have a positive impact with what you're proposing. So very much, especially also if you got any sort of original information or data that you may be even developing in-house, still taking that and still saying, like, in addition to what we already collect and know, because we've been measuring that at the community level, we've also got these promising practices that are recognized by these national institutions or directly with the funder that provides additional support as to the methodology by which we're going to be implementing the program. So tying those all together, I think, is the best way to prime yourself to compete, particularly with regard to points for the program design.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thank you.
Any more questions or?
Yes, I see someone has asked about accessing the presentation. Ultimately, I like to kind of go back, particularly if I may have misstated something or something changes over time. I like to take at least a day or two post presentation to just re-review the materials for any errors or mistakes. But shortly thereafter, we will be uploading this presentation to our website at lawonthefam.com in a way that will be publicly accessible to everyone. And you can directly access those hyperlinks to those research databases, and let's hope that they remain live and functional.
Thank you.
If there's
all right.
nothing else, I'd like to thank you again and look forward to seeing folks on Saturday.
Yep. Thank you very much. That was excellent. All right, Peter, let's keep us moving.
Right. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, the entire Law on the Fam team. Again, really, really appreciate all that insight. Again, you can expect more feedback. We'll send more follow-up details in our weekly newsletter next week. So you can get that stuff from us, and then we'll make sure to include the link for the Law on the Fam website as well, and make sure we're spreading that out as soon as that goes live. So definitely excited to continue this conversation in the future and over the next couple of weeks. But actually, we're gonna change gears here in a pretty major way. So definitely encourage folks to kind of sit back a little bit and relax. I'm gonna actually stop recording and then start a recording because this is a separate kind of conversation.